Hello, fellow American patriots. This is a stabbing that took place in Beijing. I repeat, Beijing. So don't think that these people haven't infiltrated everywhere. Israeli diplomats stabbed in Beijing during Hamas's call for Day of Terror, not Day of Rage. The supporters of Hamas, the leftist media, has spun it into Day of Rage. No, Day of Terror is what it was called and what it is. Let's go.
Israeli diplomat stabbed in Beijing during Hamas call for Day of Rage. A staffer at the Israel embassy in Beijing was stabbed on the streets with a knife, according to Chinese authorities. Beijing police on October 13th said they had arrested a 53-year-old foreign man who engages in small commodities business in China's capital. They didn't provide further details on the suspect's nationality.
Because it wouldn't fit the narrative, that's one. Number two, it is of the possibility of it being an Arab is extremely plausible. And the reason for that is the profession that the news article has stated is very similar to the types of trades that these people do in countries in which they are just staying in with no permanent goals. They're not there to plant their roots. They're not there to raise a family. They're there for a task. And this sort of micro contract work has been peppered all across the world. They're usually procuring some sort of goods or services for another larger conglomerate somewhere in the Middle East. So they're just being a middleman for procurement of anything, something very simple that they might have needs for. So the guy is basically working as a procurement agent for any sort of business needs. It could be anything. Overwhelming majority of the time, it has something to do with construction. And that's how they gain their legitimacy as to why they are there physically and what type of business they're conducting. That legitimizes them. Then step two is the actual operations in which they are there for. It could be doing stuff like this, or it could be something even much more complex, such as being a handler or being a point man in some sort of a network, etc. So, yeah.
The victim, aged 50, was a diplomat's family member and was injured in front of a supermarket in the Chaoyang district's Zuojiazhuang neighborhood, according to the Chinese statement. The Israeli embassy identified him as an Israeli embassy employee and said that he is in stable condition after being treated in the hospital. Videos circulating on social media show two men wrestling against each other, with a white shirt man holding a knife repeatedly jabbing the other on the shoulder and chest area after the victim fell to the ground. Shouts can be heard in the video during the assault, and the pavement was smeared with blood. Several locals stood by and watched, but no one offered help during the period. The man in white limped away afterward, taking a backpack with him. In a longer clip apparently taken after the attack, locals tried to explain what happened while crowding behind a policeman in uniform. "He's from the Israel embassy," one man said to another, pointing to the injured man in a gray shirt, adding that he believed the other man was Middle Eastern. The man's face was half covered in blood. A small pool of red had already formed around him.
And they did nothing. Exactly. They did nothing.
"Ambulance will be coming soon shortly, okay," a man was heard saying in the background. The stabbing happened on the 7th day of the Israel, Hamas war that has claimed some 2,800 lives on both sides of the border, coinciding with the day when Muslims hold large weekly prayers. Hamas militants, having launched the deadliest attack on civilians in the region in decades over the weekend, had urged Palestinians to rise up on Friday to demonstrate, mobilize, and clash with Israeli troops in the occupied West Bank. Israel has sharply criticized Beijing for its ambiguous stance on the Gaza violence.
Beijing can't really do anything, in the sense that anything Beijing does is to detriment of Beijing, because Beijing is sometimes directly, sometimes indirectly, but within the chain of not necessarily a chain of command, but chain of location, for lack of a better term, is part of this. They're not very closely part of this, but anything that the Islamic world has to gain out of this is to the benefit of the communist regime in mainland China.
The country's foreign ministry said its ambassador to China Rafi Harpaz expressed deep disappointment with the Chinese statements in his phone call with the Chinese envoy to the Middle East Zhai Jun on Thursday, according to a readout. There was no clear and unequivocal condemnation of the terrible massacre committed by the terrorist organization Hamas against innocent civilians and the abduction of dozens of them to Gaza, the statement released on Friday said. Mr. Harpaz also took issue with Beijing's wording, such as the sadness over civilian injuries and calls for immediate ceasefire, he said, are not...
See? Appeal to emotion and appeal to emotion. In which direction? In the direction in which it will help the terrorist cause and it will help the communist goal.
Appropriate in light of the tragic events and atrocities of the last few days. The Chinese announcements do not contain any element of Israel's right to defend itself and its citizens, a fundamental right of any sovereign country, that was attacked in an unprecedented manner and with cruelty, that has no place in human society, he said. U.S. Ambassador to China Nicholas Burns wrote on social media that we are shocked by today's attack on an Israeli diplomat in Beijing. He said that he has spoken with Israeli officials and offered our full support to the Israeli embassy and Israeli community in China. The U.S. Embassy in Beijing has issued an alert warning Americans in China to maintain vigilance with regards to your surroundings.
Which is a fantastic decision. Whoever made that decision to put that out, that was a brilliant call.
The embassy doesn't have details on the attacker's motivation. It noted that a former Hamas leader has called for October 13th to be a day of rage, sparked...
By the way, one of the reasons that it was the former Hamas leader who called for a day of terror is so that technically Hamas can assume no responsibility by saying that, well, it was a former leader who did it, if it ever came to that. So, don't think that, there's some information here falling through the cracks. No. This is a proper execution.
In caution in numerous countries around the world. To keep safe, it recommends Americans vary the time and routes they go to work or perform errands to disrupt people who might be targeting them, keep a low profile, and beware of impatient, possibly hostile motorcyclists, scooter riders, and cyclists on crosswalks. Scan hands and eyes of people near them on pedestrian roads, and keep colleagues and family informed about their daily activities. Both Secretary of State Antony Blinken and Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin were in Israel to signify their support.
Blinken ain't blinking. His eyes are shut.
A U.S. aircraft carrier has arrived in the region, along with scores of warplanes heading to U.S. military bases in the Middle East.
I love you all. God bless you all. Forgotten country.